Too, I wanted to ask how your brother's doing. Last time I talked to you, I mean, you were in the throes of making a monster. I think he was chasing like a 2,000 pound total at like 18 years old. Like, how's his development coming along?
Yeah, so he got the 2K total below 20. We got that done. At the time, we got the heaviest deadlift done in competition below 20. It's a bit of a stretch goal, but we really want to do 1,000 kilos, so 2,200 before 22. But a lot of it will come down to like we've switched his technical model for the bench. We kind of bought into this idea that a soft touch, real, because I think there's two types of benchers. There's guys who are, everything is about positional maintenance. I call them like positional benchers. Very, very widespread in the higher levels of lightweight classes. And then you have kind of power benchers where speed actually kind of matters, right? Like you look at like someone like Julius Maddox has never done a slow maximal lift. It's either fast or he doesn't make it. A lot of Josh Bryant's guys, like a lot of their training is compensatory acceleration work. They treat it almost as more of a power event, and none of them can grind. They blow it up off their chest or it comes right back down on them. And they've kind of leaned into this power centric, like obviously you have to be big, you have to be strong, but rate of force development, speed off the chest is a quality that's like innate to the bench press. And you always saw that the lighter guys always were positional benchers for the most part. And we've always thought, like, look at Kirill Sarachev. If you're a big guy, if big guys are getting away with a suboptimal bench. And if they leaned into being a positional bencher, they'd be better. And we spent 2 years really developing Max as a positional bencher, and we did not get rewarded for it. We progressed at the same speed we would have otherwise. He made night and day progress in his technique by all accounts. Everybody says bench looks so much better, and we were not rewarded for the amount of work I spent like watching his bench, watching his videos, hanging out in the garage with him. And so I'm starting to open my eyes to the idea that maybe for bigger athletes, it's not just that they're getting away with it, but this power dominant bench model for bigger guys is more viable than I thought. And so we're kind of transitioning our training of him and our thought process for like what makes a good set into being a little bit more of a power dominant guy. And I'm pretty confident that's going to be the breakthrough we need to be as good of a bencher as he is squatter and deadlifter. Because if he can put up like 850 on the stiff bar in a meet, that's like top 10 all-time drug-tested stiff bar pulls. Like he's getting up there. Squat's not quite where it needs to be for a super, but it's coming along really well. He's not a full-size super yet. Just eventually, like very slowly and methodically filling out the weight class should put us in a good spot with the squat. The bench is the only one where I'm like, hey, maybe we need to revamp our approach a little bit.
What do you think is to blame for the lack of return? Do you think it's that he's benched one way so long that this slightly different position requires strength and development in areas he hasn't developed yet? Or do you think that there's like a trade-off in a more optimal setup, not having the developmental punch, so maybe it's not sustaining strength and development in him for every touch he does? What do you kind of lay at the feet of that kind of unimpressive return that he got?
Yeah, so I can't imagine its physicality because we spent 2 years being pretty meticulous. Like I can't imagine that he lacks area in his body that's necessary to perform this task well. If anything, like Max and I are a great athlete lifter combo because Max is wildly averse to changing things if they're working. That's just kind of his, and he's very laid back. Like Max, I think, because he decided like it was the first thing he was ever good at. He was good at powerlifting, and he's like, I want to be like a top guy. We always looked up to like Eric Lulibridge and Andre Milanichev were like the coolest guys in the world. And I think he intuitively, Max, terrible coach. We had him try it. I was like, hey, Max, I've got a lot of demand. Like I turn down a bajillion people a week. Do you want to coach? Like that could potentially, like you could stay at home and make your meals and we dip our toe in the water. No, he does not have self-employment is not for Max. He needs someone to tell him when to show up or shit does not get done. But tremendous athlete IQ, but maybe not the best coaching IQ. And one of the things he honed in on was like, I need to keep my life stressors low. And he's made a lot of decisions to kind of potentiate that, right? Like he picks a job that's low stress. Max is a very smart guy. He could easily move up the ladder, chooses not to, turns down promotions, like makes a lot of decisions in his life to keep his stressors low. And I think that makes us pair well and he's resistant to change. But I talked him into this positional benching and we were very, very meticulous with like building up the physicality and the technique. So at this point, I've been like, okay, as much as I'm curious why exactly, sometimes you don't ask why, you just go with like outcome data, right? Like I think getting so hung up on, it's like got people who are obsessed with mechanistic data. I'm more concerned with outcome data and implementing that well than I am with mechanistic data. Like, sure, in the background, I might wonder why. But I honestly, I have put a tremendous amount of thought into why I think it wasn't that we were rewarded. I've just taken a more zoomed out view and say, okay, among again, look at the weight class. Maybe this was where I was going wrong, is I was looking at great benchers in a lighter weight class. Look at the great benchers in his weight class. Honestly, most of them lean towards being power benchers rather than positional benchers. Let's just not say why, and let's just say, okay, there's two technical models. One of them is more prevalent in the weight class. We're trying the less prevalent one, and it's not fucking working. Okay, maybe we should do the one that more high-level super heavyweight benchers are using, and I'm pretty confident based on the early signs that a little bit more of a sink, accepting the bar, getting more active leg drive. Like, I couldn't tell you why the more active leg drive component of the bench, because it's not like he misses off the chest. He doesn't need that more punch. But I do believe the leg drive contributes more to the horizontal travel of the bar than the vertical travel of the bar. Like, if we look at the direction of leg drive, we're trying to slide towards our spotter. We're not hip thrusting the weight up like a lot of newbies do. We want our leg drive to keep tight, so that way we can keep the press a slight decline, because muscles that press downward are stronger than muscles that press upward, just anatomically, right? We can dip more with equal training. We can dip more weight than we can bench. We can bench more than we can incline. We can incline more than we can overhead, right? So if we can cheat and turn that bench into a slightly lower plane, positionally, I do believe those muscles are a bit stronger. But also we want to establish good contact to directly transfer leg drive into getting that bar going backwards. And so we've just been leaning into that, and it's been promising enough that, like, once it works, I'm speaking into existence. Once it works well for him, I'm going to put a lot of thought into exactly why I think that is. Because, like, obviously there's just a difference. Like, super heavyweights, the game is very different, right? Lighter weight class guys fill out their weight class with about as much muscle as they can have, especially genetically elite guys, pretty early in their career. The top 165 guy in the world has filled out that class with pure muscle since he was like fucking 18, right? Because he's a genetic freak. He built the muscle easily. He filled out the class. So it's really sharpening neural and technical qualities to display that strength. Super heavyweights can just kind of build the base indefinitely. Like, there's no such thing as a big enough base. Like, so that even late stage super heavyweights, that tier 3 stuff, just especially because you have the time to, because you're only squatting every other week. You got plenty of time to do in between. You are hammering on the building the machine, using the machine well is one thing. Building the machine bigger, you never stop building the machine bigger. And the fact that, like, supers have an infinitely big machine, maybe that has something to do with why the power dominance bench does something good. I don't know. That was a really wordy, I don't know.
You ever find yourself confused by the complexity of programming? I know I struggled like crazy in my early strongman career. There was just too much advice, and every decision I made felt like a guess. As soon as I hit a snag in any program, I would have no idea what to do, so I would inevitably bail. It took me years of training and coaching to figure out how to predictably increase muscle and strength, both in myself and others. And those lessons took me to my own showings in World's Strongest Man, America's Strongest Man, and the Arnold in the 231-pound weight class. This is why we made BaseStrength AI, to give clear, direct, and personalized instruction right in the middle of your workout in real time. BaseStrength AI features 3 programs: Block, 70s Powerlifter, and Bullmastiff, each one inspired by the work ethic and programming of the biggest and strongest bodybuilders, powerlifters, and strongmen throughout history. These templates originated in my book BaseStrength, and they can be ran as is, but with BaseStrength AI, weight and volume are prescribed to you on your specific feedback, and that's personalization that even an online coach can't replicate. This gives you the absolute certainty that every rep is meaningful, that every block of training is getting you closer to your goals. It's my programming, but it's your program. Get the heart of old school training with the intelligence of a coach right in your back pocket. Head now to basestrength.com. No, that's, it's true when you look at it, because the best benchers are going to bias toward, Julius Maddox is probably one of the biggest, most muscular men to be a really good bencher, next to like Eddie Hall, next to, Kirill Sarachev was, though he doesn't look as big, he's like, 6'8" or some shit like that. He's huge. So I'm curious about the positional thing because there's this debate of I remember seeing certain followers, I want to say West Side followers, but powerlifters cue down towards the feet using the decline rationale. You talked about trying to do the straight line using the stronger muscles, as opposed to the people that will kind of arc back over their face to get the bar closer to the pivot point, which is your shoulders. Lower the moment. It sounds like you're saying that you're trying to emphasize hitting low using that musculature, but then do you come back up? How do you cue the positioning for?
Yeah. So I guess I should rephrase. I'm not saying to press in a straight line. Bar J curve needs to travel back.
Come back over, right? Okay, I got it.
That needs to happen.
Okay.
I've always argued that you see guys press it way out, and it's like that's not a sustainable position for a raw bench press. It needs to J curve back. It's funny because people will cite that old Bill Kazmaier bar path analysis. Bill Kazmaier's bench is not exactly what we see the other great benchers doing. So I don't know if Bill Kazmaier has the most exaggerated J curve. Who was the other? Was it like Mike Bridges or Larry Pacifico or something? The other one in that study, the other good bencher, is probably the bar path, the less exaggerated of the two. Is probably a little bit more like what we should be looking for. It's a little bit more like what we want, right? Depending on how wide of a bencher we are, how flared, you'll see a lot of positional benchers are a lot more flared than we used to believe in, like the ultra tucked. I think the ultra tucked is a remnant from equipped because that puts more stretch across the suit. I don't believe in that ultra low touch point. I don't believe in the exaggerated elbow tuck. I believe in neutral to flared, whatever we call neutral, right? The higher the touch point is on our chest, the more pec dominant our pattern is, and the less horizontal travel there is total. But I'm a big believer in we arch through the thoracic, and that's why the thoracic mobility is key, because while we're still doing this J-curve movement, we can still keep it at a decline, right? It's not a straight press at a decline, but we still want that press to be more downward than flat, just because I do believe those muscles to be stronger. If we can keep decline and have this tricep dominant lockout, I think it's better than if we flatten out and lock it out with our chest and shoulders. I just think that the upper end potential is higher. I think that not driving the bar back at all represents a technical fault that's going to limit someone's result. But I've come to believe that driving the bar back too early is sometimes a large technical fault as well. I don't want it to be like, here, come back up. I think that isn't a smooth J curve either. If we come back to this idea of the J curve being the gold standard, okay, well, what is this thing where we go here, back, and then up? Yeah. That's not a J curve either. Chad Wesley Smith was always obsessed with getting the bar back early. I never really liked his bench very much. It was never his best lift by a long shot because he was always the earlier the bar gets back, the better. I don't know if that's true.
Well, when I was thinking of heavyweight technical benchers, the most obvious one is Mendelsohn, who was a multiply lifter. He was in that big race with Kennelly back in the day. He's doing something still. He's old, and he's putting on the band shirts now, this new generation of nonsense. But I remember I've watched when he had the record at 7:15 or so. I've watched that video 100 times, and I've watched his tutorials on how he cues everything, and it is... it reminds me of what you used to say about if you're benching and you're comfortable, you're not benching well. Benching is very uncomfortable. But I molded myself for a few years when I was younger into that setup, and it is extremely uncomfortable, extremely limited, and extremely compact. And it's something that you almost never see anywhere else. I think the only other person that gets close is Brian Siders, and I don't even know that he was as exaggerated as Mendelsohn was. A good analysis I heard is God, just the stress on your shoulders, your AC joint coming down that low, trying to Kyriakos front lever that bench back. But it also
I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna follow it up with it calls back to what you were talking about, explosive benchers, guys who can't grind, because that's another thing. I don't know if it's a point of controversy. I guess it's chicken or the egg, but for every bit of West Side, Louis wisdom that it's the faster you go, the more likely you are to clear it out. It's yeah, but also if you have no endurance, you don't have the ability to grind. And I see that J curve, it's almost like a really clean ramp on a deadlift, where every inch the bar comes up, you should be mechanically stronger, so that when you do get pinned, you actually have a bit of purchase where you can increase your leverages and execute a clean lockout. Where if you are just 400-pound Julius Maddox or 450, the speed and power, it doesn't matter because 750 is coming up off the chest.
Yeah, you get some interesting arguments there. I think you can mask poor positions through speed, and I think that including slower work to make sure that you're positionally sound. Like I do a lot of pause work on my deadlift, even though I'm a relatively fast deadlifter. It's because lightweights aren't going to give me that feedback if I'm at a bad position off the floor, if I'm at a bad position passing the knee. So I use that as a kind of a positional audit on the way up. So I definitely think that, and there's like a heuristic that like guys who naturally lift really slow might actually might benefit from more compensatory acceleration work, and guys that naturally lift fast probably would not benefit from that much at all and would benefit more from slower, more positional work because it kind of fills in what they're missing. But I've never viewed the inability to grind as this big problem. I think a lot of that's just a genetic predisposition, and that's a technical model. Everybody's going to miss somewhere, right? The slow guy missed because he wasn't fast, and the fast guy missed because he couldn't grind. And it's like, as long as our competitive result is rising, I don't view either of those as bad. It's just like, and if it stops working, maybe you need to look at becoming slightly more like the other guy. But it's like, everybody's gonna have a sticking point somewhere, right? Like it's not, we don't need to demonize. You're gonna miss somewhere. Like you can't just pick up infinite weight. So whether you're a little bit on that faster end of the velocity curve or on the slower end of the velocity curve, but like what you were talking about, right? I'm a big believer that the lower the touch point, right, the more horizontal travel we have. That's a lot of the role of the shoulder in the bench press is the horizontal component. And I, again, talk about like technical ceilings and how overhead with it's a leg dominant, I think is a higher ceiling. I urge my athletes towards more of a pec dominant bench. I actually, as long as they can control the positions, I like that higher touch point. I like having less horizontal travel. I think guys get away with shoulder dominant benches with huge horizontal, like Kaz-esque, like it's moving a foot back and forth. But I think for most athletes, from what I've seen, the more work we can do with the chest and the triceps, the better. Like look at someone like John Hack. Can't strict press 3 plates, is a 600-pound bencher. Why? Because he's biased. Look at his fucking chest versus look at his shoulders, right? Part of that's like, predisposition. The guy with the big chest is the better bencher. But I think the more we can bias, more work being done with the pecs, that's slightly higher touch point, a lot of work, the lockout being predominantly done with the triceps, versus you see guys drop that AC joint, like their chest falls. Like that's the most shoulder dominant is like here where we cave, our chest falls down. We're not actually opening the pec fibers very much. We heave and we finish it with our shoulders. Can work. And that's kind of why, like you mentioned, like, oh, strongman, they do a bunch of overhead and then they can bench. And I think they can bench, but they would have a hard time developing that long term because they all do this very shoulder dominant pattern, closer grip, low touch, hoop, huge. Like a lot of it's just like this, like you said, Kiriako style this. And I think that's why a lot of guys also tear their pec because they actually have not trained opening the pec fibers to a higher touch point at all, right? You look at Thor's bench and it's like that. I was always worried about that. It's like he's benching with his shoulders, his pecs never really open, and of course they're not really adapted to that more stretched position.